From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Soini Gray. In the last hour, delegations from the Venezuelan government and opposition have arrived at the Foreign Ministry of the Dominican Republic to continue their talks, with hopes high that an agreement can be signed. The former Spanish Premier, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, who is helping to mediate the dialogue, was one of those received by the Dominican Foreign Minister. Zapatero, who was in Caracas on Monday for last-minute consultations with President Nicolas Maduro. The head of the Venezuelan government delegation said an agreement was ready for signing.
Yesterday we managed to form a definitive agreement with the Venezuelan opposition, and we have come here with the formality that we had established, that whatever be the agreement, we would come to the Dominican Republic to sign. This is good news for the Venezuelan people, and this is good news for all the women and men of peace in the world. This is bad news for those defeated in the signing of this agreement, that being Donald Trump's extremist U.S. administration. This is bad news for the Tillerson's interventionist warmongering tour, which he is carrying out in his double role as owner of Exxon and at the same time as Secretary of State of the United States. All of the details are completely ready, complete with all of the elements, and we are here and ready.
The current round of talks between the two sides was suspended last Wednesday, with some differences over whether a pre-agreement had been reached. Like everyone else, our correspondent in Caracas, Freddie Gillingham, has been waiting for these talks to restart, and he sent this report.
So we can confirm that the opposition and government dialogue in Santo Domingo will be resuming. It had been suspended from yesterday. We were all set and ready to receive the official presidential election date yesterday. The National Electoral Council were due to give that announcement. However, it had been delayed due to suspended dialogue in Santo Domingo. That will be resuming. We will now have to wait and see if and when they sign an agreement today. We don't really know, but as soon as they do sign an agreement, the CNE are set to give an official date for that presidential election. Let's just recap. On January 23rd, the presidential election of 2018 was brought forward to happen before the end of April. All eyes and ears have been on Santo Domingo since then, waiting for an agreement to be signed. We were at a press conference yesterday with Jorge Rodriguez, the communications minister. He did announce that the PSUV were very much ready to sign pen to paper on a coexistence agreement. We'll just have to wait and see what happens in Santo Domingo today. It's back to you in the studios for now.
We thank Freddie for that report. Venezuela's opposition-dominated National Assembly has unanimously rejected a decision by the UN Secretary General to send the territorial dispute over the Guyana Essequibo to the International Court of Justice. The National Assembly President said they rejected last week's decision to allow The Hague to deliberate on the Guyana-Venezuela border issue. The Bolivarian government has released a statement confirming its position to seek a solution by way of the Geneva Accord of 1966. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with Peruvian President Pedro Kaczynski on Tuesday as part of his Latin American tour. For more on what was discussed there, here's our Lima correspondent Jaime Herrera.
The bilateral meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski ended after about an hour of dialogue. In a joint statement Tuesday, the president said the meeting's main issue was the upcoming Summit of the Americas, which is to be held in Lima in April. The main topic of the summit will be corruption, news which comes at a time when President Kuczynski faces serious corruption charges and a second plea from Congress for him to step down. But representatives took the opportunity to compare interests, such as intervening in other countries' issues, such as Venezuela. The president said that the Lima Group is writing a statement regarding the upcoming elections in Venezuela. During these joint statements, neither Secretary Tillerson nor the President made any mention of pressing issues, such as climate change, given the United States' withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and how much climate change can affect Peru.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. Since that meeting today, Tillerson has now arrived in Colombia. the fourth country in his Latin America tour before going on to Jamaica. Tillerson will hold a meeting in Bogota with Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos and Foreign Minister Maria Angela Holguin. He's expected to raise three key issues: the war on drugs, Colombia's peace process, and possible sanctions against the Venezuelan government. Tillerson is scheduled to arrive in Jamaica on Thursday. The visit has been criticized because the U.S. president has used harsh words to describe people from Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. To discuss how Jamaicans are feeling about the visit, we are joined by Dr. Richard Bernal, a former Jamaican ambassador to the United States. He's now the Vice Chancellor, Global Affairs at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. Dr. Bernal, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So what has been the feeling on the ground to Rex Tillerson's visit to Jamaica?
Well, there is some uncertainty as to why he's visiting Jamaica at this time. The speculation ranges from discussing Venezuela and the position that the member states of the Caribbean community would take, and ranges to thinking about whether recent security measures in Jamaica would affect the economic recovery which has started in Jamaica.
So many are concerned that the United States, especially under this president, will use its might to try and force Jamaica to support its position on Venezuela, regardless of what Jamaica actually wants. Is that something that you're seeing?
The social media has had a vigorous discussion, and that possibility is raised. Many people are calling on the government not to immediately accept everything that the United States is requesting of them, but to put an agenda which is in the interest of Jamaica and not merely subscribe to the wishes of the U.S.
Now, you have a book that we were discussing off camera where you spoke about small island states like Jamaica do have a lot of power and influence and don't have to be bullied by larger states. Do you think that Jamaica is in a very good position to ensure that its wishes would be heard by the U.S. Secretary of State?
My book argues that small states can influence global superpowers. They are not without leverage, and that this is a negotiation between partners in which both sides have something that they want. And what my book demonstrates is that it is possible for a small state to get what it wants from a superpower like the United States.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernal, for joining us for this short conversation. We've been talking to Dr. Richard Bernal. He is the Vice Chancellor, Global Affairs at the University of the West Indies campus in Mona, Jamaica. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange lost a legal bid to have a UK arrest warrant against him quashed, but he has immediately launched another one to have the British authorities hold any action against him on public interest grounds. Protesters held banners in support of Assange as they awaited a verdict outside Westminster Court. Julian Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, says the risk of extradition to the US remains very real. A ruling in Assange's favor could pave the way for him to leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been holed up for over 5 years.
Today, we finally had the opportunity to put before the court the background to this case and the long history to the injustice that has led him to remain inside the Ecuadorian embassy. Mr. Assange remains willing to answer to British justice in relation to any argument about breach of bail, but not at the expense of facing injustice in America.
We take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on. In Mexico City, a 12-city protest against government corruption has come to an end. Observers say the demonstrations were successful and gives hope to the cleanup effort.
They marched the final 4 kilometers of the multi-city protest in the capital's downtown district. The dignity demonstration, led by opposition Governor Javier Corral, started in the northern state of Chihuahua. He's denouncing the Secretary of Treasury's corruption, accusing Cesar Duarte Jaquez of a series of crimes, including illicit enrichment.
This is a just cause, which a lot of us are backing up. And of course what is joining us today is the rejection to a corrupt and inept government, a kleptocracy which governs us. And here is where we get together against PRI.
Finally, after 16 days of demonstrations, the federal government signed an agreement to return the missing money to the Treasury of Chihuahua and remove the fines imposed at the beginning of the demonstration.
This is a breaking point for Mexico and everyone to receive justice, and for them to not play with thousands and thousands of millions of pesos. But the most important thing is to fight the corruption.
Among other complaints, there was one about a diversion of more than $14 million to campaigns of candidates of the Institutional Revolutionary Party.
Javier Corral investigated and denounced what the Secretary of Treasury has been doing with the PRI party, and with this, he is exposing the corruption of PRI members that have diverted money to stay in power.
After achieving what they called a historic triumph, the cross-party front proposed to continue the anti-corruption movement until a fiscal agreement is reached.
The people's dignity has triumphed, and the solidarity of Mexicans has prevailed. Beyond and without parties, they have fought against corruption and impunity.
The federal government signed a promise to extradite former Governor Cesar Duarte, accused of corruption. He is one of the 11 former governors incarcerated or under investigation for embezzlement.
The Brazilian President, Michel Temer, has announced that approving his proposal to reform the pension systems is an urgent task, but he is facing severe opposition from workers' unions and social organizations. They argue the pension reforms could jeopardize their retirement. Similar activities are expected in other regions to pressure the lawmakers to vote against the law. The final vote will take place on February 19. A highway overpass has collapsed in the Brazilian capital of Brasilia. According to authorities, concrete slabs fell onto parked cars and an outdoor restaurant. 4 cars were crushed in the incident. Fortunately, no one was wounded, trapped, or killed.
We had already been carrying out an inspection in order to repair some of the overpasses built by Nuevacap. It's likely that the fissures, corrosion, and infiltration were the causes of this accident.
Ex-U.S. President Bill Clinton is in Dominica to view the island's ongoing recovery efforts in the wake of last year's Hurricane Maria. The Clinton Foundation will be launching an action network on post-disaster recovery. The former U.S. president met with Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit and several members of his cabinet. In a press conference, Skerrit announced plans for long-term sustainable development while rebuilding schools and homes.
And today, our relationship with the Clinton Climate Initiative will grow deeper as we announce our plans to work together to develop a rapid integrated resource plan for Dominica's energy sector.
Appreciate the heroic efforts you are making to overcome the impacts of the natural disasters that have befallen you, but even more, to take advantage of this moment to position your country to handle the next disasters better.
In Trinidad, an injunction blocking work on a highway extension through a forested area in East Trinidad has been lifted. The NGO Fishermen and Friends of the Sea had been granted a temporary injunction in early January because of the potential threat to the Oripo Savannah. The Environmental Management Authority has designated the Savannah an environmentally sensitive area, yet it issued a certificate of environmental clearance for the project authorizing the construction. Work is now clear to resume. The NGO says it will challenge the court's decision. Caribbean community countries are joining together to ensure medicine safety and monitoring in the region. The Caribbean Regulatory System is launching the VIGI-CARIB program, which will pool resources, share information, and coordinate activities to enable the reporting of adverse drug reactions and substandard or falsified products. CARICOM hopes this will lead to stronger drug safety and monitoring systems in the region. The Mexican film director Guillermo del Toro has been named Best Director of 2017 for his film The Shape of Water. The award for Best Feature comes from the Directors Guild of America. Del Toro's film is one of the favorites to win at the Academy Awards next month, including Best Director, Best Film, and Best Original Screenplay. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on. Welcome back. It was a volatile session on Wall Street, but the market managed to regain some ground. The Dow rose about 2%. Still, that wasn't enough to make up for Monday's loss, when the Dow suffered its largest one-day drop in history that pulled down markets across Asia and Europe. But the U.S. Treasury Secretary is unfazed by the market contagion.
We are very focused on the long-term economic growth, and we believe that the policies that we've enacted, including tax reform, are very positive for long-term economic growth.
The value of cryptocurrencies continues its drop today. Bitcoin continues its slide to below $6,000. One Bitcoin was worth $19,000 in December, but U.S. authorities see little reason to panic.
Well, just recently, the volatility we've seen in Bitcoin was not as large as volatility we've seen in some other asset classes, such as the VIX product, which is known as the fear index, a volatility gauge. And so we have seen extraordinary volatility in Bitcoin, but in our world, in commodity derivatives, we're used to volatility in asset classes.
A report by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has identified 206 companies involved in business ties with illegal Israeli settlements on the West Bank. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more.
A report published last week by the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, identified 206 international campaigns involved in business ties with illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Although the report deferred naming any of the companies, it noticed that the 206 firms under review, 143 are based in Israel, 22 in the US, and 41 in Europe.
The international human rights law considers the establishment of Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories a war crime. Those who participate in this action are partners in the crime. The United Nations Human Rights High Commissioner was assigned to produce a report, including all the companies which support settlements to be targeted for sanctions and boycott, until they commit to the obligations of international human rights law and stop being partners in crimes committed against the Palestinian people.
Israel fears that the companies listed on any UN blacklist would be targeted for international boycott and divestment. Israeli envoy to the UN, Danny Danon, denounced the report as a shameful act that would serve as a stain on the UN Human Rights Council forever. The report observed that businesses play a central role in furthering the establishment and expansion of Israeli settlements. New Israeli statistics have shown recently that over 400,000 Israeli settlers live in 150 illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank alone, excluding East Jerusalem, in clear violation of international law. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Palestine.
U.S. President Donald Trump held a roundtable with law enforcement and interest groups on the gang known as MS-13, in which he tied the issues of gangs to immigration and his proposed border wall, repeatedly threatening a government shutdown.
If we don't change the legislation, if we don't get rid of these loopholes where killers are allowed to come into our country and continue to kill gang members, and we're just talking about MS-13, there are many gang members that we don't even mention. If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country. I'd love to see a shutdown if we don't get this stuff taken care of.
Hong Kong's highest court has revoked the jail terms of the leaders of the 2014 Umbrella Movement protests. The protests shut down parts of the city for several months. The three, all in their 20s, were originally given community service and suspended sentences, but the appeals court raised that to prison time. The latest ruling means they are now free to walk. Last week, the trio was nominated for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize by a group of U.S. lawmakers. Now, let's have a look at some other stories from around the world.
A quake of magnitude 6.4 has hit the eastern coast of Taiwan, causing a hotel in the city of Hualien to collapse. At least 30 people are trapped in the rubble, and local rescue workers are trying to reach the grounds of the hotel. The quake comes exactly 2 years after another strong tremor shook the southern city of Tainan, killing 17 people. Hundreds of Cape Town residents are being forced to line up overnight to stock up on water, as South Africa's second-largest economic hub and tourism attraction struggles with severe drought. Authorities say each personnel will be allocated 25 liters of water per day and have been urging residents of the city to save water in the run-up to day zero.
I think there's going to be chaos. I mean, I hope day zero never comes, but I can see with people wanting to come here and the desperation for water, I think we're still going to realize that water is more valuable than oil. I don't want to be too critical, but I think better plans should have been put in place a long time already.
Hundreds of protesters march outside the U.S. Embassy and UN headquarters in South Sudan's capital after the U.S. government banned the export of weapons to South Sudan on Friday in a bid to press President Salva Kiir to end a 4-year-old civil war. However, protesters claim the U.S. move was a tactic aimed at undermining the government. The UN representatives in Syria are calling for an immediate pause on the armed conflict for at least 1 month to enable the delivery of humanitarian aid and services, as well as to evacuate critically sick and wounded people.
They're calling for at least 1 month humanitarian pause starting immediately throughout Syria, given the very critical humanitarian needs and the inability to provide the aid that we do have. The team there, they warns of very dark consequences of the crisis in several parts of the country.
Reggae icon Bob Marley would have celebrated his 73rd birthday, and in Jamaica, there's a full day of activities planned. Bob Marley is regarded as a cultural icon who implored the people of Jamaica to know their history. He advocated for social change while allowing for listeners to forget their troubles and dance through his music. Visitors to the Bob Marley Museum in Jamaica wished Bob Marley happy birthday. Let's take a listen.
Happy birthday, Bob. Yeah, like Bob. Happy birthday, Bob. Happy birthday, Bob. Happy birthday, Bob. Alles Gute zum May your legacy live on in the spirit. Leaves fill it. Happy birthday, Bob. Blessed Earth Strong, Bob.
Blessed Earth Strong, Bob.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.